What I hope to do over the next couple of minutes is show you what a perfect asset protection system looks like and reveal how this process combines rock-solid law with structures I've learned to use over 30 years of my career of protecting people from financial attack. I'm going to give you the characteristics of a typical plan, what you always need to consider no matter who does it, and I'm going to do it quickly and in a way that you can take with you and remember for the rest of your life. As I've said before, there are hundreds of different kinds of products being touted as asset protection tools. The lawyers and the capitalists that are making a killing each year off the countless other strategies will probably want to hunt me down and eliminate me for revealing this information. Because when enough people know about it, the folks getting rich selling overpriced and or ineffective protection strategies will suffer the impact on their wallets. But here goes. What I'm going to share with you right now is the blueprint so you can be protected for life. And isn't that what we all want? To be free from worry that somebody or some organization can come in at any moment and rob us of our livelihood. So what does the perfect plan look like? Well, a perfect asset protection plan has 4 characteristics. I want you to think of this acronym, STOP, like a stop sign. STOP, because asset protection is designed to stop would-be creditors. Almost every solid plan will have these characteristics. I'll give you a brief overview and then get into some more detail. So if anything seems confusing at first, do not get hung up on it, because I will bring it all together for you in a very clear and concise way. All right, starting with the S in STOP. The first characteristic of a perfect asset protection plan is that it allows you to stay in control. You should do your plan when you're not in trouble. Normally, when you're not under the gun, you will always be in 100% control. The only time when you might have to share control is if you're really in trouble, and that sharing is done with a protector or an offshore lawyer who is on accounts with you. Anyway, I'll explain this completely in a few minutes. The second characteristic is the T. You should trust nobody. Trust nobody. Assume every single person you deal with is a crook. Don't wait for them to prove it. The world is filled with unscrupulous people who want to steal your money. Obviously, you're going to do your best to avoid them, but even the savviest person can be duped from time to time. So never construct a plan where you're forced to trust anybody unless you choose to trust them. That's one of my rules, and if you follow it, you will not get hurt. The third letter is O, and that stands for the characteristic of off-balance sheet. That's another way of saying own nothing. The first rule of asset protection is what you do not own cannot be taken from you. Almost all asset protection functions by taking protected assets off of your balance sheet. John Rockefeller said, "Own nothing, control everything." If you don't own anything, or it appears that you do not own anything, no lawyer will sue you unless somebody is willing to pay his outrageous hourly rate. The final letter is P, and that characteristic is protective legislation. This is achieved by using a country with laws in place that provide you with protection. Now, you don't always start in places that have protective legislation. Reasons for this would be to save money or to keep your asset protection structures very simple. But when you're in trouble, you will always want to be in one of the several jurisdictions that offer protective legislation. Okay, so now that you know the STOP acronym, the next piece is to understand the 3 components of a perfect asset protection plan. The first one is an asset protection trust. Trusts are a key element, and they are a business entity that takes assets off of your balance sheet. Now, a trust is a complex entity, like a person, but a very easy way to understand a trust is to think of it as a magic bucket. Picture a bucket into which you pour your assets. The bucket expands to accommodate whatever you fill it with. Once your assets are in that bucket, it becomes the new owner. The trust becomes the new owner. But because it is a bucket, and in reality the trust is carefully structured, it can't make decisions for you. It's a bucket after all. So you still control everything it holds, but technically you don't own them anymore. The next step is to take your bucket, the trust, and put it into a country where you do not reside. Let's call this going offshore. This is where the real magic of that bucket comes in. Once that bucket is placed offshore in a different country, it can be protected by rules that cannot be broken. Much like a force field or the law of gravity, even if you leave that bucket in the care of somebody else, no one can reach into it and remove anything without some very specific things happening. A, you removing the force field to allow them to reach into the bucket, or B, you being attacked and having them move the entire bucket for you. The second component of most asset protection plans is an LLC. It is not always necessary, but it is the easiest way to stay in control when you have an offshore trust bucket sitting in the care of an offshore location. Why is that? I will show you now. Even though the assets in the LLC are owned by the bucket, the trust, the LLC is carefully structured so that the bucket, which is the owner, does not manage the LLC. Instead, the LLC is structured so that a manager, you, and not the owner, the bucket, is in control. This lets you, the manager, control the assets but not own them. This is the nirvana we have been after, when you own nothing and control everything. This would make John Rockefeller very happy. The LLC separates ownership, which stays with the trust, from control, which stays with you. The third component will be an offshore account. You should always choose your own bank custodian. And I can tell you that almost any non-US bank will do. Why? Simple. Because no country in the world, period, recognizes US judgments. If your money is sitting in a properly designed plan, in a safe bank, in a safe jurisdiction, I can tell you that your money is much safer than if it were sitting at Chase Bank or Wells Fargo. It's just that simple. The safest your money will ever be is in a solid plan and in a solid jurisdiction, period, end of report. Now, what do they look like? Let's start with the bucket, the trust. This is a typical trust. It has a set lore. That's you. You will almost always have an offshore trust company. The location of this trust company will determine the laws that will apply to you. You'll almost always have a protector. That can be you or an offshore lawyer or an offshore protector. There are companies that specialize this, and I'm going to tell you who the very best ones are soon. There will be beneficiaries and even classes of beneficiaries. This will always include you and any other people that you want to benefit. But there is a variable in this arrangement. This trust company is not perfect because it is run by humans. I assume that they are crooked, even though they are not. I always structure my clients' affairs so that they are never vulnerable to the trust company because of this assumption. So, how do we get around the problem of the potentially crooked trust company? How do we make it so that we do not have to trust the trust company? Simple. That is the reason for the LLC. You simply put an offshore LLC in place. We take control away from the trust and give it to the LLC, which is managed by you. In these simple steps, we have taken the assets off your balance sheet and kept you in control. You are getting your cake and eating it too. It seems almost too good to be true, but let me assure you, it really works. Every jurisdiction is different, and this LLC is normally disregarded or passed through for tax purposes, but you can also have it treated as a corporation. This is all up to you. You have a great deal of flexibility, and indeed, under this LLC, you can put hundreds of other entities. You can have corporations, which might be controlled foreign corporations. You can have partnerships. You can have any offshore entity that you want, all owned under this offshore LLC or under this trust. Indeed, any business structure or tax planning which you might want to adopt as a human being can be done just as simply in this asset protection structure. It is a great way to keep you in control of your assets because when you put the LLC in place, you no longer use the asset protection trust to manage the assets held by the LLC. Assets held by the LLC remained owned by the Asset Protection Trust, but they are controlled by the manager of the LLC. And who is the manager of the LLC? You. The LLC ensures that you, the human being client and settlor of the trust, controls the LLC, but does not own the assets in the trust. Control happens to be with the little guy, you, who is the manager. In short, because you are the manager of the LLC, you remain in complete 100% control. And this is the best way to keep you completely in control of an offshore investment. Now, what do you normally do with this offshore LLC? Simple. You add an offshore bank account. It does not have to be in the jurisdiction of the Asset Protection Trust or the LLC. And if you have been listening to me over the months or years, you may know this because I have drummed it into your heads. Many banks have stopped accepting accounts from U.S. citizens. There are a large number of banks, including Barclays, Hong Kong, Shanghai. Most of the majors are no longer wanting U.S. citizens. And it's in large part because of the legislation that went into force in 2012 and in 2013 begins forcing these banks to be transparent to the IRS and to basically account to the IRS for your deposits. But by putting this LLC in place, you overcome those objections. You'll find the same banks who won't take you when you're trying to go there as an individual or as a trustee of your own trust somehow seem to be able to be comfortable that it's enough removal that they will accept the account. With an LLC, you have 100% control as the manager of the LLC. You've reestablished yourself as the control person, not by virtue of your status of being the settlor of the trust, but by virtue of your status of being the manager of the LLC. And when this LLC goes and opens bank accounts, etc., or engages in investments, or buys stocks and bonds in any currency it wants, the management and control of those assets is with this person, the offshore manager of the LLC, you. Note also that this is all most people will ever need. You have all the flexibility and freedom as a normal human being investing offshore. You can do insurance investing. You can even form an insurance company and eliminate tax on your interest, dividends, and capital gains, all legally and with full disclosure to the government. All that can be done in a simple little structure, and this little structure will work for 95 to 98% of all people who need asset protection. And by work, I mean 2 to 5% of people have existing problems, pending litigation, or other factors that will prevent them from putting this in place. Those are issues I address on an individual basis, so don't concern yourself with them at this moment. Now, you can see the 3 parts of a perfect asset protection plan. Remember this, and just remember it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be a life-changing event. This is a process and a choice for you to sleep well at night and no longer be vulnerable to people who want to take you apart. Remember the 4 stop characteristics. Stay in control. Trust no one. Keep it off your balance sheet, and always make sure you're in a country with protective legislation. These are key elements for anybody that wants to protect themselves in the long run. If you do this, you can sleep well at night. You will no longer be vulnerable. You can take control of your own life, and you can stop the professional takers from being able to abuse you. You never have to live in fear anymore. And that's what I'm trying to give you. It's the tools to stop being beat up and to take control of your own destiny. It is time for you to take control of your life and to stop these people and to know that you can really defend yourself. You never, ever have to be vulnerable again. Don't let them get away with beating you up. I'm here to help you make sure that you can stand on your own 2 feet, hold your head up high, and stop these guys from hurting you. It's my greatest joy.